do what I do therapeutically if I didn't believe that. But I want to close by making a very clear distinction between the difference between sexuality portrayed in pornography and healthy sexuality. Because too often people buy into this hook, and the industry does a great job of this hook, is that somehow pornography is a teacher or a substitute or a preparation for marital intimacy. And I'm here to suggest that they could not be further from one another. Pornography use is the antithesis of intimacy and healthy connection, including sexuality. I can't tell, my husband's a family physician, and I cannot even tell you how many times he tells me the drugs that are being prescribed to men who are into pornography because they can no longer even experience normal, healthy sexual response. These are so far apart, and you have to regard what this criminal enterprise called the pornography industry would have you believe. It's a load of baloney, and it's hurting a lot of people. Let's go down this list very briefly, and then we'll turn our time to Dan. In pornography, sexuality is portrayed as lustful versus loving. It's public, treated like a spectator sport at times, versus private. It's isolating versus unifying and connecting. It's deceptive versus honest. Fantasy-based versus anchored in reality. The body is an object, toy, or weapon. There was a study that came out 2 years ago that showed in the top 50 DVDs sold in the United States, 88% of those had violent themes throughout them. Violence in pornography is becoming more the norm than not. Versus the body being sacred in healthy sexuality. One decreases well-being while the other enhances well-being. One is degrading while the other is respectful and honorable. One involves using someone versus loving someone. Pornographic portrayals of sex are spiritually deadening versus spiritually meaningful. One is socially irresponsible and harmful versus socially responsible and beneficial. Healthy relationships benefit society. And if you're interested in that kind of research or reading, I'd recommend The Case for Marriage by Linda Waite and Maggie Gallagher. It's an outstanding book. Pornography often involves violence and coercion versus mutual consent and volition. And lastly, pornography, as I've mentioned before, is associated, there's proven ties to this, with crime, abuse, infidelity, prostitution, and divorce. And I would include domestic violence because the recent research is showing more and more correlations between pornography use and domestic violence, which is very pertinent in Utah because Utah has one of the highest domestic violence rates in the nation. Pornography use and domestic violence are going hand in hand more and more often. Are they causal? I don't know that. We need to do more research on that. But lastly, to finish up on the most positive note of all, is that healthy sexuality is associated with life and joy. And in closing, I just want to share my belief in the power, the healing power and transformative power of healthy, authentic relationships in our lives. I believe they are sacred and some of the most important work we will engage in and the important learning we'll ever engage in. I also want to reiterate this hopeful message that healthy relationships are possible for all of us, even those of us who are in the grasp of an addiction or something we wish we weren't. We may have to bolster and learn those things that can promote intimacy and work to change and turn away from those things that undermine it. But it is possible for all of us. And that's my closing message and hope. And I wish us all the best in that pursuit. Thank you. Please welcome my good friend and colleague, Dan.